A blizzard raged outside, and guilt howled within. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Tell me your city. I value your voices. Wolfe listens to the wind. If you've never heard the sound of winter barging into Nero Wolfe's office, you've missed one of life's more instructive contrasts. Inside, you've got 70 degrees of warmth, the perfume of beef consommé drifting from the kitchen, and a man in a yellow silk robe lecturing the universe on the stupidity of mankind. Outside, it's New York in January, gray, frozen, and loud about it. That's where I was coming from when the bell rang. Wolfe didn't look up from the book on his desk, something in German, probably scolding the French about vegetables. I was half tempted to let the visitor freeze, but the knock came again. Quick, urgent, with that expensive sort of desperation that usually means trouble is about to rent a room in our lives. "Archie," Wolfe said, without raising his eyes. "The door." "Yes, sir," I said, "unless it's a blizzard asking to come in." "Then you may direct it to Central Park." I went, because I'm the mobile half of the firm. The wind hit me in the face like a grudge. On the stoop stood a woman bundled in fur with a kind of controlled panic in her eyes, the kind that's been rehearsed for society parties but cracked under real fear. She was tall, with a face that had seen more attention than affection, and she was shivering less from cold than from what she was carrying inside her head. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. "That's right. And you must be the lady who mistook our front step for the Ritz lobby. Come in before you turn into a snow sculpture." She swept in, leaving behind a gust of winter and the faint scent of gardenias. When we entered the office, Wolfe glanced up, and that, for him, is the equivalent of a red carpet and fanfare. "Mr. Wolfe," I said. "This is—" "Mrs.," she interrupted, removing her gloves one finger at a time. "Mrs. Helena Vardis. I believe I require your assistance, Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe frowned as if she'd just announced a famine. "Madam, I require my peace. Yet here you are. Sit." She did, gracefully but with a tremor that no debutante training could hide. I took my chair near the globe bar, ready to play translator between her nerves and Wolfe's patience. "I wouldn't have come," she began, "but I was told you are discreet." "That depends," Wolfe said, "on what one wishes concealed." Her gloved fingers rested on her handbag. "Something has been taken from my husband's study. Not money, not jewels, but a manuscript. It was his father's unpublished memoirs. He kept them locked. Yesterday morning, the lock was broken." "Call the police," I said. "I can't." Her voice cracked like thin ice. "Because I think I know who did it." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "You think, or you know?" "I think," she whispered. "Because of a whisper I heard through the vent. A voice, familiar, but distorted, talking about the pages, the signature. And then, silence. I've been hearing that whisper in my head all night." Wolfe sighed. "Mrs. Vardis, people are prone to hearing much when they wish to confirm their fears. What is the significance of these memoirs?" She hesitated, eyes darting to the fire. "They concern a scandal, a political one, from 20 years ago. If the pages were to be made public, it would destroy a man who now occupies a very high office." I whistled low. "That narrows it down to half of Washington." She ignored me. "My husband swore to keep it secret, but someone knew, and now the manuscript's gone." Wolfe leaned back, steepled his fingers, and looked at her as if gauging whether she was a fact or a nuisance. "And you have come to me why?" "Because whoever took it," she said, voice tightening, "will come again, to our house or to me. And I think—" She glanced toward the window where snow hissed softly against the glass. "They've already begun." Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment. The radiator hissed, and the smell of winter crept back through the cracks she'd brought with her. "Archie," he said finally, "see Mrs. Vardis to the front room." Warm her. Then call Saul Panzer. I want to know who is whispering in the blizzard. I got Mrs. Helena Vardis out of her coat before it qualified as a crime scene. Fritz, who regards all drafts as personal insults, had already appeared with a tray. He set a steaming mug in her hands and a plate of butter cookies at her elbow, as if nervous systems could be stabilized with sugar. Given the way she clutched the mug, he might be on to something. I left her under his benevolent jurisdiction and went back to the office. Wolfe had not moved. The German volume lay open like a spread of winter itself, dense, uncompromising, and not to be crossed. He lifted one index finger, the semaphore for proceed without the sound of your own voice irritating me, so I used the phone. Saul answered on the second ring, because Saul always acts like he's been expecting your call for a week. Panzer. Good morning, Saul. Put on your snowshoes. We have a whisper in a blizzard, a broken lock, and a manuscript that makes important people nervous. When? Now. Come here. Bring the eyes you reserve for people who say they're sure, and wear something that won't frighten society matrons. A grunt stood in for assent. I hung up. Wolfe finally looked at me. You got the part about matrons, I asked. I got the part about Panzer, he said. Now, Mrs. Vardis. He didn't have to say, bring her in. I fetched her. She'd traded tremor for intention, which is always better for conversation and worse for candor. When she sat, she held herself as if the chair were a witness. Madame, Wolfe said, you will indulge me. I prefer to obtain facts before I inhale conjecture. Your husband's name, occupation, and the location of the study. Dmitri Vardis, she said. He runs Vardis & Lane, a boutique investment firm. The study is on the second floor of our townhouse on East 72nd. Your house staff? A housekeeper 3 days a week. No live-in staff. We entertain often. Guests come and go. Last night we had none. The lock that was broken, did you see it? Yes. It's an old roll-top desk in his study. The latch was pried. He discovered it after breakfast. He refused to call the police. Why? She hesitated. Because of the contents. Because of the man mentioned, and because he thinks... She glanced down. He thinks he can handle the person responsible himself. Handle how? I asked. By paying them, she said. So flatly I knew she believed it was the wrong answer even as she said it. Wolfe's eyelids drooped. Your husband assumes a thief is always a merchant. It is often true and always dangerous. Have you told him you came here? I left a note that I was out for an errand. I don't want him to know yet. He is proud. Your whisper, Wolfe said. The vent. She folded her hands, the gloves making a soft hush that fit the story too well. Our town home is 100 years old. The rooms connect with these old ventilation grates. Last night, around 11, I was in my dressing room. I heard a voice, a man's, through the vent. I couldn't make out the words at first, but then I heard signature, and page 37, and the chair squeaks. There was a laugh, then nothing. I went to the study door. It was locked. My husband was asleep. You didn't wake him, Wolfe said. I listened, she admitted. I was afraid I would seem foolish. When the door was still locked, I convinced myself it was a neighbor's radio. In the morning, she flinched. In the morning he shouted. The desk was damaged. The manuscript, his father's, gone. What does the manuscript assert? Wolfe asked. You needn't name the official. She set the mug down. That 20 years ago, this man, then merely ambitious, engineered a smear against his rival using fabricated letters. My father-in-law had proof, copies of the original notes, and a signed acknowledgement from one of the forgers. He never published. He wanted his son to decide someday if truth was worth the ruin. And your husband decided no, I said. He decided later, she said carefully. He is cautious. Names, Wolfe said. People who knew about the manuscript. She looked at the fire. My husband, myself, his partner, Elliot Lane, knows it exists, but not the contents. A family friend, Dr. Miriam Halpin, heard enough to be curious. And my husband's assistant, Nicholas Dean, once saw the desk drawer open. 4, Wolfe murmured, and the whisper, familiar? I think so, she said. It reminded me of Elliot's voice when he's nervous, or, this is absurd, perhaps our doorman's nephew. He comes by to help with packages, and he imitates people for laughs. I don't know. You do, Wolfe said, but uncertainty is more comfortable. Archie, book Mr. Vardis's address. We will require a visit after Mr. Panzer arrives. We? I asked. We, the firm, he said. I will remain here as nature intended. You will observe. Panzer will verify. We will collect impressions, which may be more useful than fingerprints. Out of curiosity, I said, what's the fee structure on rescuing retired skeletons from ventriloquists? Wolfe's mouth curved. We will know the fee when we know the buyer. The bell rang again. This time the knock was a practiced 3-count, the rhythm of a man who respects timetables and cheap locks equally. Saul came in with snow on his shoulders and eyes that took inventory. In 2 minutes he had Mrs. Vardis's description, the address, and the promise of a quiet approach. Wolfe gave him the list of names and the instruction not to be valiant. Check the townhouse exterior, he said. Entrances, sight lines. Note the doorman's nephew. Then watch the house from noon to 3. Report to Archie by 4, unless you discover something that requires interrupting a hot lunch. Then call me anyway. Saul gave me a sideways glance. He's in a mood. He's been interrupted twice before lunch, I said. Bring back a hero and he'll forgive you. When Saul left, Mrs. Vardis stood. I must go too. If I'm gone long, Dmitri will call everyone we know and ask if I've been kidnapped. You will return home, Wolfe said. Say nothing more than necessary. If your husband reveals a plan to pay anyone, inform Mr. Goodwin at once. I have no objection to commerce, but I dislike bad bargains. He closed the German book with the finality of a gavel. Archie, coat. On the stoop, the wind had found fresh grievances and was airing them. I tucked Mrs. Vardis into a cab and climbed in after her, long enough to collect directions, lay out how we'd handle my appearance at her door without spooking the spouse, and pin a time to it. She squeezed my hand once, a quick, cold press that said she was more scared of silence than of strangers, and then the cab's tail lights smeared red across the snow. On my way to get the sedan, my pocket vibrated. Fritz had sent a text, which is not his style. He considers phones useful primarily for calling grocers. It said, with an economy that matched Wolfe's, office drawer open, was closed. That was all. I went back inside fast enough to make the heat gasp. Wolfe was still seated, but his eyes had changed temperature. I crossed to his desk and saw the right-hand drawer slid out an inch. I'd locked the office when I took Mrs. Vardis to the front room, and no one but Fritz had come near the door since. Did you? I asked. No, he said. Nor Fritz. He tapped the air. Someone touched it. While we were in the hall with Saul, I said. Or when I took her to the front room. Perhaps, he said. Or earlier, and we failed to notice. Either way, Archie, our blizzard has learned to whisper here. He pushed his chair back a fraction, which for him is a lunge. Go to the townhouse. Proceed exactly as arranged, and keep your eyes on vents that were not made for air. The townhouse on East 72nd didn't look like the kind of place where people whispered through vents. It looked like the kind of place where people hired lawyers to keep whispers off the record. The snow had muffled the block into a soft white anonymity, which was fine by me. I like my recon with fewer witnesses. Saul was stationed across the street, half hidden in a parked delivery van, pretending to fix a clipboard. He gave me a small nod, the Panzer version of a symphony. Mrs. Vardis had done her part. The doorman tipped his cap and buzzed me in without question, which meant the story of my investment consultation had been delivered cleanly. Inside, the foyer was polished wood and self-respect. I followed the sound of footsteps to a tall man with an economy haircut and an expression that had met one too many market downturns. Dmitri Vardis himself. "Mr. Goodwin?" he said, hand out, voice clipped. "My wife said you'd call. You're interested in consulting?" "Not financially," I said, "but I'll accept a brief look around if it's not a bad time." His eyes narrowed. "My wife sent you for appraisal." "You could say that," I said pleasantly, and followed his lead up the stairs before he could think of better questions. The study looked exactly like it should for a man whose money had earned its own manners. Leather, brass, and self-assurance. Except for the desk. The roll-top latch had been pried like a tooth from a stubborn jaw. The air smelled faintly of burnt dust, as though someone had used a tool and wiped the evidence too clean. Vardis saw me looking. "A burglary," he said, too flatly. "The police are unnecessary. The item was sentimental." "I gather your wife disagrees on the sentimental part." He turned slowly. "My wife's nerves are not up for public scrutiny. I trust you won't add to them." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said, taking in the details. There was a vent under the window seat, broad cast iron and recently dusted except for one small smear of oil near the corner screw. Above it, the window lock was unlatched and the curtains had been drawn back unevenly. Someone had wanted the window to look closed, not be closed. "You sleep through the night?" I asked casually. His shoulders tightened. "Most of it." "Anyone else in the house?" "Only my wife. And we had no guests." "Your partner, Mr. Lane. Did he have a key?" "Elliot." He looked surprised enough that it might have been honest. "He's a friend, not a burglar. Why would he—" He stopped himself. The kind of edit that tells you the truth just got caught trying to sneak out. "Why would he what?" I asked. "Never mind. You've seen the damage. I'll handle repairs privately." He turned toward the door, clearly signaling that the audience was over. "I'll tell Mrs. Vardis you said so," I said, lingering by the vent. "One more question. The manuscript, what language?" "English," he said, "but written in code. My father believed in his secrets." "Then your thief will need a dictionary and patience," I said. "If I find him first, which would you prefer I return? Your pages or your peace of mind?" He looked at me as though the second was already beyond salvage. "You can't return what isn't missing, Mr. Goodwin. Good day." Back on the street, Saul joined me without looking like he had. "2 visits in an hour," he murmured. "A man in a tan overcoat, cheap fabric, clean shoes. Went in after you left the cab earlier. Stayed 12 minutes. No cab on arrival or departure. Walked west. Recognize him?" "No, but he walked like he knew the route. Doorman greeted him by name. Mr. Lane. Then our partner's been and gone?" Saul nodded. "Want me to trail him?" "Not yet. I'll see what Wolfe wants to squeeze from what we've got before we spill more footprints into the snow." I left Saul to his surveillance and headed back to the brownstone. The city was still wearing its white disguise, and by the time I made it through the door, Fritz was ladling soup as if the world beyond us didn't exist. I passed on the bowl and went straight to the office. Wolfe had his eyes closed, which in his case means the machinery is running. "Well," he said, without opening them. "The damage was neat. Too neat. Somebody pried the desk but didn't take anything else. The vent under the window was tampered with, 1 fresh smear of oil, 1 unlatched window lock, and a host who thinks burglars are a private inconvenience. Oh, and Mr. Elliot Lane dropped by while I was playing inspector." "Lane." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Describe him." "I didn't meet him. Saul saw him. Tan coat, walked like he owned the pavement. Doorman knew him." "Good. A social familiarity. Wolfe leaned back, fingertips pressed together. What of Mrs. Vardis? She played her part. Looked worried enough to sell sincerity wholesale. Her husband's tight as a vault and just as decorative. He's hiding something, but it might not be the manuscript. It might be the fact he knows who took it. Wolfe nodded once. You noticed the vent? Couldn't miss it. Someone loosened it recently. Either to speak through it or to reach through. The oil looked like tool residue. My guess, whoever whispered didn't just whisper. They planted something. An excellent conjecture, Wolfe said, and one we shall verify before dinner. Call Mr. Panzer again. He will return with tools. I wish to examine the mechanism from here. From here, I echoed. He gave me a look reserved for particularly dense members of the species. Mrs. Vardis will host a dinner tomorrow evening, inviting her husband's partner, his assistant, and their family friend, the doctor. She will do this upon my instruction, conveyed by you. During that interval, Mr. Panzer will inspect the vent and recover whatever residue remains. Dinner and a stakeout, I said. The woman will love it. She will obey it, he said. Fear is a better motivator than affection. Then she'll be a model client, I said. Fritz appeared silently in the doorway with a silver tray. Sir, a letter just delivered. No messenger remained. Wolfe gestured. I took it. The envelope was plain, no return, no watermark, but the paper smelled faintly of linseed oil, the kind that clings to typewriter ribbons. I slit it open and read aloud. Tell Mrs. Vardis to stop asking questions. The past deserves its snow. No signature, just a small dark smudge at the bottom, ink or soot. I handed it to Wolfe, who held it up to the light and studied the shadow of the fold. A typewritten warning, he said. Anonymous, of course, but hand-folded. The sender is nervous, not professional. Good. Good? I asked. Yes, it means he will err again, and soon. Archie, no mention of this note to our client. Let her fear the silence, not the noise. He leaned back, eyes narrowing with quiet relish. Our thief is speaking, Mr. Goodwin, but he does not yet know that whispering to the wind is pointless when it ends at my window. The next morning began with the kind of quiet that only means Wolfe is working. Not moving, mind you. Working. There's a difference, and the only sound it makes is the faint scrape of his fingernail on the arm of his chair when the mechanism starts turning. He'd eaten breakfast alone, which meant he was mulling the night's letter. I'd spent mine pacing between the desk and the phone, waiting for Saul's midnight report. It came at 11:59 sharp. He'd seen Elliot Lane leave his apartment around 10, carrying a thin portfolio and looking, in Saul's words, like a man hoping not to find what he's looking for. After that, nothing. Lane vanished into the snow's silence. When I brought Wolfe the update, he listened with his eyes closed, which for him counts as applause. Now, at 10 in the morning, I was perched near the window, watching the frost pattern try to annex Manhattan. Fritz entered with the mail, a small pile, all respectable envelopes, and one thin gray package. Another delivery? I asked. He nodded. Left at the door. No name, only the address. Wolfe grunted. Bring it. It wasn't a letter this time. Inside the gray wrapping was a single sheet of paper, folded precisely once, and a small brass key attached with twine. The note was typed again. There is more beneath the vent than air, but open it carefully. Snow hides more than it covers. Wolfe read it twice, then set it on his blotter with the precision of a surgeon placing an organ. Our correspondent has grown generous, he said. Or theatrical, I added. Maybe he's auditioning for the role of conscience. He ignored me, which is his form of agreement. Call Mr. Panzer. He is to meet you at the Vardis residence within the hour. The key may or may not fit the vent. You will observe, not dismantle, until he confirms it's safe. I have no intention of explaining to Mrs. Vardis why her home now features an unplanned hole. Understood. Anything for the road? Yes. Take gloves. I dislike fingerprints that are not instructive. I called Saul and left with the key in my pocket and suspicion in my head. By the time I reached East 72nd again, the snow had thickened to a mean little whisper, exactly the kind Wolfe would appreciate for metaphorical value. Mrs. Vardis met me at the door. She was still pale, but there was a brittle steadiness under it now. Did he, Mr. Wolfe, find something? He's thinking, I said, which is the same thing, give or take an adjective. I need to look at the study again, and this time I've brought help. Saul arrived 3 minutes later, as punctual as sunrise. We followed her upstairs. Dmitri Vardis wasn't home. She said he'd gone to a meeting downtown. The air in the study still carried a trace of polish and smoke. Saul crouched by the vent, his flashlight making the dust glitter like tiny spies. He inserted the key carefully. It turned, smooth as butter. He slid off the grate. Inside, the duct was wider than usual, old construction, and there, caught on the curve of the metal, was a folded scrap of paper tied with red thread. Saul extracted it with the kind of gentleness most people reserve for newborns. "Envelope," he murmured, "but no seal." I opened it. Inside were 2 things, a half-burned matchstick and a photograph. The photo was old. Sepia tone curled at the edges. 4 people stood on a city street, a younger Dmitri Vardis, an unfamiliar man with a military haircut, a woman whose face I couldn't place, and Elliot Lane, unmistakable even then, thinner but still wearing that practiced calm of a man who measures words by the inch. "Recognize her?" I asked Mrs. Vardis. Her hand went to her throat. "That's Miriam Halpern, Dr. Halpern. She's a friend of ours." "Looks like more than a friend from this angle," I said. "She and my father-in-law worked together years ago," she said quickly. "On some foundation project." Saul frowned at the matchstick. "This was struck recently. Sulfur's still faint. Someone lit it, then snuffed it. Symbolic, maybe. Or careless," I said. We replaced the items, leaving everything as it was. Saul photographed the scene and pocketed the duplicates for Wolfe's study hour. Mrs. Vardis watched us with a look that suggested she'd already begun to regret ever hearing about detectives. "Mrs. Vardis," I said gently, "do you know where Dr. Halpern is today?" "She teaches at Columbia," she said. "Her lectures end around noon." I nodded to Saul. "You finish here. Make sure no one's creeping around the vents. I'll go see the doctor and ask about her fondness for photography." By the time I reached Columbia, the snow had turned the campus into an ivory sketch. Students hurried by, heads down, their chatter muffled. I found Dr. Miriam Halpern in her office, a tall woman in her 50s with eyes as direct as a scalpel's point. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, before I could introduce myself fully. "Mrs. Vardis phoned. She said you're assisting her husband. I hope that's true." "It's true enough," I said, "though whether he'd call it assistance depends on what we find." She gestured for me to sit, and I did, because she had the kind of authority that makes even chairs obey. "You've come about the manuscript." "That's right. You knew about it." "Dmitri mentioned it years ago," she said. "His father showed it to me once. An extraordinary document. Dangerous, too. He was obsessed with truth and consequence. I told him that truth without timing is cruelty." "And did he agree?" "He smiled," she said. "That was his answer to most of life's errors." I took out the photograph. Her reaction was small but sharp, a flicker of recognition that she suppressed too late. "Where was this taken?" I asked. She studied it. "In front of the old Vardis office on 44th, before the partnership expanded. That man, on the left, is Carl Denton, their original accountant. He vanished after the scandal that ended the foundation. Vanished how? Resigned, disappeared. There were rumors of embezzlement, but none proven. I pocketed the photo. One last thing. Someone's been using your name in connection with a whisper, heard through vents. Her eyes narrowed. If someone's whispering my name, Mr. Goodwin, they should speak louder. I have nothing to hide. Maybe she believed that, maybe not. When I left, the snow had turned to a fine, steady fall, erasing footprints before they could make up their minds where to lead. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report in silence. When I finished, he placed the photograph on the desk beside the anonymous notes and regarded them like ingredients for a dish he hadn't decided whether to cook. "So," he said, "we have a letter, a key, a photograph, and a match. Plus one nervous doctor and a husband who thinks denial is security," I said. "Indeed. And one more detail, Archie." He looked at me with faint satisfaction. "Our client's dinner, has she confirmed it?" "She has. Tonight at 8. Lane, Halpin, and the assistant are all coming." "Excellent. Then tonight," Wolfe said, lifting his glass of beer, "we shall dine second-hand on deceit and see who chokes first." It was the kind of evening that makes even the city think twice before venturing out. The blizzard had found its rhythm, moving in slow spirals that turned street lamps into small suns, drowning in milk. From the warmth of the brownstone, the world looked silent enough to fool you into believing it had good manners. Wolfe sat, immovable, before the fire. The photograph lay centered on his desk like a corpse at an inquest. "Archie," he said without looking up, "it is impossible for people to handle a secret collectively. At best, they juggle it until it drops. At worst, they throw it at each other when the lights go out." "Tonight's dinner," I said, "looks like the juggle kind." "Precisely. And one of them will fumble." He reached for the envelope with the typewritten note. "The author of this, whether driven by fear or conscience, seeks to guide us without exposure. He wishes to cleanse himself without washing his hands. You will watch them all, but particularly Dr. Halpin. She strikes me as the sort who confuses moral outrage with righteousness. That's practically a professional hazard in her line of work." Wolfe allowed the hint of a grunt, his form of laughter. "Go. You will attend the dinner as Mrs. Vardis's guest. Take Mr. Panza. Have him assume the role of an acquaintance of yours from the Gazette. His eyes will serve better than conversation. And Archie, observe their appetite. Guilt rarely eats well." I left him to his orchids and his theories, which often overlap in temperament. Saul met me outside the Vardis townhouse, his hat dusted white. "Our hostess looks nervous," he murmured as we climbed the steps. "Curtains twitching upstairs. Husband's home. Partner arrived 10 minutes ago." Inside, warmth battled with tension. Mrs. Vardis greeted us with the kind of politeness that comes from rehearsal. Dmitri stood near the fireplace, managing a smile that stopped short of sincerity. Elliot Lane was already there, slimmer than I'd expected up close, with eyes that smiled a little faster than his mouth. Dr. Halpin joined moments later, the wind pushing her in like an afterthought. The assistant, Nico Dean, arrived last, a boyish man with the pale look of someone who lives under fluorescent lights and ambition. He carried himself as though every gesture might be judged. The circle was complete. Dinner began with all the right noises, clinking silver, polite chatter, wine poured with visible relief. I kept my end of the table conversational, something between harmless and nosy. Saul, at the other end, blended into the wallpaper, which is where he does his best work. "So," Lane said, glancing toward me, "you're a friend of the family?" "Something like that," I said. "I collect unusual evenings." His smile didn't falter, but his fork paused mid-air. "You'll get one here, I'm afraid. Dimitri's been distracted lately." Vardis looked up sharply. "Business distractions, Elliot. Let's not make our guest part of the firm's mood." Halpern's voice slid in, smooth and clear. "Dmitri, you underestimate how transparent tension can be. It's not the first time your firm has drawn attention for matters less than financial." "Careful," Vardis said softly. "We have guests." "Oh, come now," she said, her fork tracing lazy circles on the plate. "You can't pretend the past doesn't exist because it's inconvenient. Your father believed in truth even when it was unpleasant." It was subtle, but I saw it. Mrs. Vardis's hand tightening on her napkin. Lane's gaze flicked toward her and away, guilty as a thief who's just remembered the door was left open. "Truth," he said, recovering, "is only noble when it doesn't destroy the living." Halpern's eyes flashed. That's what cowards say before they lie. The silence that followed wasn't the ordinary kind. It had weight, the kind you could balance a verdict on. Then Nico Dean dropped his spoon. It clattered, sharp and final, and the spell broke. "Excuse me," he mumbled, pale. "I'm sorry. Nerves." Mrs. Vardis smiled at him, kindly, almost maternally. "No harm done. I think we're all a little on edge tonight." A little. I'd seen calmer poker tables in back rooms before a raid. Dessert arrived. Fritz would have fainted at the sight of it, a lopsided pudding that trembled like the moral foundation of the table. Conversation drifted to weather, then travel, then silence again. And through it all, the faintest draft slipped under the window. I glanced at Saul, who gave a minute nod. When coffee came, I excused myself under the pretense of finding a restroom. Instead, I followed the hall to the study. The door was closed but unlatched. Inside, the desk still wore its scar from the break-in. The vent, now clean and quiet, seemed harmless enough, but the faintest sound, a rhythmic ticking, came from beneath it. I knelt, held my ear close, and realized it wasn't a clock. It was a slow drip. Water? No, thicker. I fetched my penlight and angled it through the grate. Inside, where Saul had found the photograph, something dark glistened on the metal curve. Ink, I thought first, but when I touched the corner of a handkerchief to it, it came away rusty brown. Not ink. Blood. I was still processing that when Saul appeared at the door. "Someone's about to leave," he murmured. "Lane. He says he has an early train." "Tell him to take the long route," I said. "We've got something new in the vent." We slipped back before anyone missed us. Lane was standing, coat on, hat in hand, murmuring apologies. His eyes met mine briefly, and there was something behind them. Fatigue or fear, or both. He turned to Mrs. Vardis, offered her a polite nod, and left. The rest of the guests trickled out soon after. When the door closed behind the last of them, Mrs. Vardis sagged into a chair, all pretense gone. "Was it awful?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "That comes later." I told her about the blood, carefully omitting the timing of our discovery. Her face went white, but she didn't speak. Instead, she reached for the phone, then stopped, her hand hovering over the receiver. "Mr. Wolfe will want to hear this," she said finally. "What do I do?" "Nothing," I said. "Go upstairs, lock your door, and tell your husband you're exhausted. I'll handle the rest." When Saul and I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was exactly where we'd left him, a mountain of composure surrounded by the artifacts of anxiety. I laid the handkerchief on his desk. He examined it without touching. "Blood," he said. "So our vent is now a confessional and a crime scene." "Right now it's both," I said. Lane left first. I'd bet my week's pay he knows why. Wolfe's eyes half closed, his voice calm as ever. "Then tomorrow, Mr. Goodwin, we invite Mr. Lane to a far less comfortable dinner. Here." He leaned back, the faintest smile forming, and this time the whispering will stop. The next morning started with snow turning to slush, the city's way of saying the beauty portion of winter was over. Inside the brownstone, the air was thick with the smell of orchids and coffee. The combination, Wolfe swore, sharpened his mind. I'd had 3 cups of the latter and was no closer to enlightenment. But Wolfe didn't need caffeine to start the day dangerous. He was already dictating to his brain, which was bad news for someone. The handkerchief with the blood stain lay in a glass dish on his desk, properly labeled as if the police had dropped by overnight to audit our methods. Fritz had refused to touch it, which I couldn't blame him for. Blood wasn't part of his cleaning charter. "Archie," Wolfe said finally. "Saul's report?" "Lane went straight home," I said. "No detours, no late-night meetings with his conscience. Panzer watched his building until dawn. No visitors. He left again at 7 sharp for his office." "Excellent. He has the discipline of the guilty." Wolfe sipped his beer, a breakfast habit I've long since stopped questioning. "He will come here today. I shall invite him under pretense of assisting his client's wife in some minor legal confusion. His curiosity will not resist." "I'd say curiosity's the only thing keeping this mess upright," I said. "Meanwhile, what do we tell Mrs. Vardis?" "Nothing. Her ignorance is an asset. Fear constrains honesty, and I intend to preserve both in her case until the right moment." "You're collecting emotions now." He gave me a side glance sharp enough to nick. They are often more revealing than evidence. The vent blood, for instance, was not incidental. It was a message, or a remnant of one. A wound, perhaps. Meaning somebody bled through a vent to make a point. Meaning, he said with the serenity of an executioner, that something occurred within that duct. Someone handled the manuscript there, or removed something concealed beside it. If so, there may be residue beyond the trace we recovered. Mr. Panzer will examine the remainder this afternoon, while I babysit Lane. Precisely. You will charm him, irritate him, and extract from him the fragment of guilt he is clutching. I expect a confession, not in words, but in reflex. That sounded like fun, in the way root canals are fun if you're observing from across the street. At 10 sharp, the doorbell rang. Fritz, who'd been listening for it like an orchestra cue, admitted our guest. Elliot Lane entered the office wearing a fresh overcoat and a practiced calm. His eyes flicked around, taking in the room, the books, and Wolfe himself with that precise politeness of a man accustomed to boardrooms and betrayals. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "you asked to see me. Your note was unexpected." "Life is a sequence of such interruptions," Wolfe said. "Sit. Mr. Goodwin will see to your comfort." I handed him coffee, though what he needed was a sedative. Wolfe studied him for a full 15 seconds before speaking again, a small eternity in which Lane's composure slipped just enough to be interesting. "You attended dinner last evening," Wolfe said. "A convivial affair, I hear. Did you enjoy it?" Lane hesitated. "As much as one can enjoy forced civility. I take it Mrs. Vardis relayed some complaint." "None," Wolfe said. "Her hospitality was impeccable. But I must inquire about the matter of the manuscript." Lane stiffened. "That again. I told Dmitri long ago that keeping those pages was dangerous. His father's obsessions died with him. Why exhume them?" "To avoid their misuse," Wolfe said. "You are his partner. You might share that interest." He sighed, the performance of a man weary from unspoken truths. "If you're suggesting I took them, you're wasting your time. I wanted them destroyed, not stolen." "Destroyed?" Wolfe repeated mildly. "Curious. And yet you visited the Vardis house yesterday morning." Yes, to speak with Dmitri. Business." "Indeed. And when you left, a new item appeared within the study vent." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Would you care to explain that coincidence?" Lane blinked, but his hand twitched once on the coffee cup's handle. Small, telling. "I don't know what you're implying. Only that you seem unusually concerned with air circulation." He set the cup down too quickly. Mr. Wolfe, I came here as a courtesy, but if you intend to insult me—" Wolfe raised a hand. "Not insult. Clarify. When you removed the photograph from the vent, you left behind a trace of blood. Yours, perhaps, from a cut, a sharp edge, a hasty movement. Shall we examine your hands?" Lane's composure cracked like thin ice. "You can't. This is absurd." He half rose, then saw my stance and sat back down. "All right," he said, voice dropping. "I touched the vent, yes. I thought something was hidden there. I wanted to make sure the manuscript hadn't been copied." "Copied by whom?" His answer came too fast. "By Dmitri." "Your partner?" I asked. "He's been behaving strangely," Lane said. "Agitated. He talks to himself, locks the study. He said if anything happened to him, the truth should out. I thought he'd left a copy. That's why I looked." "You cut yourself?" "Yes, a small cut. I didn't think—" He stopped, realizing what Wolfe had been doing all along, walking him through the confession like a patient being lulled under. "Why not tell him you searched?" Wolfe asked. "Because it would look as if I doubted him. And I did. I still do. That manuscript, whoever has it, could destroy all of us." "All?" Wolfe repeated. "Including Dr. Halpern." Lane's mouth opened, closed, then tightened. "She was involved long before my time. She advised the elder Vardis. If those papers surface, her name won't survive the ink. And you think she knows where they are? I think she's scared enough to pretend she doesn't." Wolfe regarded him for a long, silent moment. Then, with the tone of a judge dismissing court, he said, "That will be all for now, Mr. Lane. You may return to your affairs. Mr. Goodwin will see you out." Lane left, visibly relieved but trembling around the edges. I waited until the door shut. "He bought it," I said. "Or sold it. Hard to tell which." "He confirmed it," Wolfe said. "Fear, deflection, and injury. A trifecta. He was at the vent, and he was not alone. He suspects Dr. Halpern because guilt always seeks a twin. Excellent. Excellent. We still don't know who took the manuscript." "On the contrary," Wolfe said softly. "We know precisely who did not. Mr. Lane is too tidy for theft. His intrusion was desperation, not crime. The true culprit hides behind virtue." "Meaning Halpern again." "Meaning Halpern?" he agreed. "But we shall not move yet. I have sent for Mr. Vardis himself. By this evening the circle will close. And Archie—" "Yes?" "Keep a watch on our mailbox. The blizzard has a habit of delivering whispers." He leaned back, eyes half-lidded, the faintest curve of satisfaction touching his mouth. Outside, the thawing snow rattled against the glass like quiet applause, and I got the distinct feeling the next message wouldn't come on paper. Wolfe had timed it precisely. Dmitri Vardis arrived at 4:30, the hour when the light in our office turns gold and everything looks more expensive than it is. Fritz had already been instructed to admit him directly, which he did with the solemn grace of a man delivering a lamb to the lion. Vardis entered with his jaw set and his overcoat still half-buttoned, which told me he'd come here under protest. He looked more drawn than the last time I'd seen him, as if the snow outside had decided to move in behind his eyes. He glanced at me, then at Wolfe, then back at me, as though debating which one of us would ruin his afternoon first. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "my wife didn't mention this meeting." "She was not asked to," Wolfe replied. "Sit down." He didn't. He stayed standing, his gloves in one hand like a man ready to walk out before the door even shuts behind him. "If this is about the manuscript—" "It is," Wolfe said. "And about the blood in your study." That got him. He blinked once. "Blood?" "Found in the vent below the window," Wolfe continued, voice calm as a held breath. "Your partner, Mr. Lane, admitted to prying it open. He cut himself in the process." "That fool." Vardis muttered. He had no right. No, Wolfe said. But you gave him reason. You allowed suspicion to grow by concealing too much, a mistake people make when their secret is shared. He sat then, slowly, as if his legs had been advised of their own betrayal. You don't understand. Those pages, they can destroy more than a reputation. There's a man in Washington. Wolfe waved a hand. Yes, yes. You needn't name him. The relevance is not political, it is human. Someone has taken the manuscript not to expose, but to protect, or to threaten exposure as leverage. Which is it, Mr. Vardis? He looked up sharply. You think I'm being blackmailed? Are you? He hesitated just long enough to confirm it. There was a letter. No name, no demand yet. Only a warning. I burned it. Foolish, Wolfe said flatly. Destruction of evidence rarely destroys its implications. I leaned forward. When did you get it? 2 days ago. Before the manuscript disappeared? Yes. I looked at Wolfe, who gave the faintest nod, the kind that means the gears have caught. You assumed the warning referred to the memoir, Wolfe said. So you secured it more tightly, and in doing so, revealed its value to the wrong observer. Who was in the house that day? Only Helena, he said, and Nico, my assistant. He brought some files for me to sign. Describe him. Capable, ambitious, eager to be noticed. Dangerous adjectives in combination, Wolfe said dryly. What is his financial position? He's well, paid, but I wouldn't call him content. Few men are, Wolfe murmured. He turned his gaze toward me. Archie, you will find this Nico Dean. Now, bring him here if possible, or failing that, bring what he leaves behind when he lies. Understood. I left immediately, glad for the chance to stretch muscles that had been sitting through too much deduction. The drive to the Vardis office downtown took 20 minutes through slush that felt like driving through soup. The building was a sharp, modern box pretending to be important. The receptionist gave me a polite smile until I showed her a card with my name and Wolfe's. Something about it always makes people straighten their posture. Mr. Dean, I said. He's still here, she replied. Conference room 2. I found him alone at the far end of a glass table, riffling through a stack of papers that looked more like props than work. He looked up with that quick brightness people use when they're cornered. Mr. Goodwin, he said, Mrs. Vardis mentioned you. Is something wrong? Not if you tell the truth the first time, I said, sitting down across from him. Otherwise, we might be here till the janitor starts billing overtime. He tried a smile. I don't understand. You were in the Vardis house the day before yesterday, I said. You went upstairs. You stayed in the study longer than it takes to get a signature. Then something went missing. Don't waste my time pretending you don't know what I'm talking about. His face drained of color. I didn't steal anything. That's not a denial I can hang my hat on. Did you see the manuscript? He swallowed. Only once. Mr. Vardis showed it to me months ago. Said it was dangerous history. And you thought maybe it was worth something. No, he snapped too quickly. But someone else did. Who? He hesitated, then whispered. Dr. Halpern. I leaned back. She told you that. She didn't have to. She called me last week out of nowhere, asking if I still worked for Mr. Vardis. Said she'd been worried about him. Asked if I'd noticed any strange behavior. Then she mentioned his father's unfinished business. She said it was better if the truth was handled privately, before others mishandled it. Meaning what? She offered me money, he said quietly, to make sure the pages came to her first. I whistled low. And did you? He looked at his hands. I tried, but they were already gone. I searched the desk, the drawers, even the vent. That's when Mr. Lane walked in. I panicked and left. You told her? I called her that night. She told me not to worry, that she'd take care of it. I stood. You've been helpful, Nico. Don't try to leave town or even change your socks without checking with me first. I'll know. By the time I got back to the brownstone, the winter light was dying. Wolfe was still in the same position. He could have been cast in bronze. I gave him the account. He listened without moving, only his eyes alive. "So," he said when I finished, "our virtuous doctor has dirtied her hands." "Seems that way," I said. "She paid for a theft, and now she's trying to manage the fallout." "Not merely manage," he said softly. "She has likely already disposed of the manuscript, but she cannot destroy its consequences. That is where she will fail." He reached for the phone and dialed with the slow precision of a man selecting a weapon. "Fritz," he said when it was answered, "inform Mrs. Vardis that I request her presence this evening at 8, and Archie. Summon them all. Lane, Halpern, Nico, and her husband. The game has reached its final move." He replaced the receiver and closed his eyes, the faintest sigh escaping him. "The whispering blizzard is over, Mr. Goodwin. Tonight it will speak aloud." By 8 o'clock, the brownstone had the kind of tension that makes you whisper even when you don't know why. The air felt charged, like the moment before a match is struck. Fritz had done his part. Coffee service laid out like a formal truce and every chair perfectly spaced around Wolfe's desk. The fire burned low, the light steady and deliberate. Wolfe was at his post, an immovable figure of calm calculation. I've seen him face down murderers, extortionists, and congressmen, but I'd never seen him look more content than when expecting a confession. Our guests arrived with the punctual misery of people invited to their own exposure. Dmitri and Helena Vardis came first, the strain between them visible in every step. Elliot Lane followed, taut and wary, and behind him young Nico Dean, looking as if he'd stumbled into the wrong room of a dream. Dr. Halpern was last, her coat immaculate, her eyes sharp and unyielding. She took in the room, the arrangement, and Wolfe, and in that half-second I saw her understand exactly what kind of evening she was walking into. "Please be seated," Wolfe said. His voice was gentle, but it left no room for alternatives. "Mr. Goodwin will close the door." When the latch clicked, silence settled like dust. "Let us begin," Wolfe said. "You are all aware of the matter that brings you here. The disappearance of a manuscript from Mr. Vardis's study, a theft accompanied by peculiar incidents of intrusion and intimidation. I propose to resolve it now." Lane crossed his legs. "If you can, Mr. Wolfe, you'll have my admiration. This business has already torn half our nerves apart." "I doubt you can spare more," Wolfe said dryly. "Nevertheless, admiration will not be required. Only attention." He folded his hands over his stomach. The manuscript, written by the late Mr. Vardis Sr., was no mere memoir. It contained evidence of a political deception, long buried but still potent. Several of you knew of its existence. Only one of you knew its hiding place. He turned his eyes toward Dmitri. "You, sir, were its custodian. You received an anonymous warning, burned it, and in so doing revealed both fear and knowledge. Fear attracts attention. Knowledge attracts theft. That combination produced the current mischief." Dmitri's voice was low. "I never spoke of it to anyone." "No?" Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. "Not to your assistant?" Nico Dean's head jerked up. "He didn't tell me where it was, I swear. He stopped, realizing the room had turned toward him. "I mean, I knew about the document, yes, but I didn't take it, I just looked." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "You looked because you were invited to, by someone who understood your nature. Dr. Halpern." All eyes swung to her. She didn't flinch. "That's absurd." "No," Wolfe said. "It's accurate. You called this young man last week, invoked concern for his employer, and appealed to his loyalty. You mentioned unfinished business and hinted at compensation. That, madam, is persuasion wrapped in philanthropy." He obeyed. "When he failed, you arranged for the recovery yourself." You can't possibly prove that, she said, voice calm but tight. I need not, Wolfe replied. Your actions prove it for you. The key left at our door was yours. The phrasing of the note, "Snow hides more than it covers," is from a lecture you gave on moral psychology 6 years ago, published in the Journal of Ethical Inquiry. You reuse your metaphors, Doctor, as others reuse mistakes. Her composure wavered. You're guessing. I do not guess, Wolfe said, and the room believed him. You sought to retrieve the manuscript, not to exploit it. You intended to destroy it, as you once urged the elder Mr. Vardis to do. You feared its resurfacing would ruin the living for the sins of the dead. That is your justification, but your method, blackmail by proxy, manipulation, and finally theft, has done precisely what you hoped to prevent. She was very still. If you're right, where is it now? Wolfe's gaze flicked toward me. I opened the right-hand drawer of his desk and lifted a thin packet bound with red thread. Gasps are rare in that office, but I got 3. Recovered, Wolfe said. Mr. Panzer retrieved it this afternoon from beneath the vent's inner casing, where you concealed it after your nocturnal visit, Doctor. The blood was yours, not Mr. Lane's. The sharp edge that cut you was from the sheet metal. You returned later, using the key you left for us, intending to reclaim or destroy it, but by then the house was watched. Dr. Halpin's face had gone pale. I thought, if I could just— Yes, Wolfe said softly. You thought to protect. You told yourself the ends absolve the means, but morality, madam, is never a garment that fits better in the dark. She covered her face with one trembling hand. Then you'll give it back to Dmitri? Not quite, Wolfe said. I have made arrangements for its safe transfer to a trustee, someone unconnected to your circle, who will determine whether its contents warrant exposure. Neither vengeance nor suppression will serve. Truth requires neither hysteria nor silence. Lane exhaled heavily. Then it's finished. For you, yes, Wolfe said. For Mrs. Vardis, perhaps a reprieve. For Dr. Halpern, a reckoning. Halpern stood suddenly. You don't understand. Those papers could destroy reputations, careers, lives built on lies long forgotten. The world doesn't need more scandals. The world, Wolfe said, needs fewer deceivers. Sit down. She did. Not from obedience, but exhaustion. Wolfe turned his attention to the Vardises. You have been wronged, Mr. Vardis, but not by enemies, only by fear and pride. If you wish to reclaim your peace, destroy the idea of secrecy itself. Mrs. Vardis, you have my sympathy. You brought this storm into my house, and now it is leaving. Helena's eyes glistened. I didn't mean to. I know, Wolfe said. Intention is often the last refuge of the guilty and the first comfort of the innocent. Archie, see our guests out. They filed out slowly, Vardis and his wife silent, Lane hollow with relief, Nico subdued and small, and Dr. Halpern the last, pausing by the door as if to speak. Wolfe didn't look at her, and she left without another word. When the house was quiet again, I shut the door and turned back to him. That was a neat demolition, I said. You might have billed extra for moral instruction. He gave a small sigh. Bah, moral instruction is wasted on the morale. He leaned back, closing his eyes. I accepted this case not for profit, but because theft inside these walls affronted me. I have endured a blizzard of foolishness, and I do not forgive trespass lightly. Meaning you're about to forgive it now. Meaning, he said, I'm about to eat. He reached for the bell cord. Fritz would appear with dinner. Balance would be restored. Outside, the storm had stopped. The world, muffled and white, looked as if it had confessed something too. Wolfe lifted his glass and said, almost to himself, Men conceal truth as they conceal rot, under snow, under words. But both melt, Mr. Goodwin, and what remains is always the same. I raised my own glass. Ugly. Unavoidable, he said. Now, Archie, close the window. I have no wish to hear the blizzard whisper again. Dinner that night was veal kidneys and sherry, and Fritz had outdone himself. I should have been enjoying it, but the air in the office still carried a taste of something unfinished. Wolfe was quiet through the meal. Not his usual meditative silence, but the kind where you can feel the machinery in his head turning without oil. That's when I knew it wasn't over, not quite. When we'd polished off dessert, an apricot tart that would have made a bishop forget his vows, I poured coffee and leaned back. You're chewing on something, boss. Spill it before it chews back. He dabbed his lips with a napkin, set it down precisely, and regarded me. I dislike residue, Archie. I dislike it in dust, in logic, and especially in truth. This case has residue. Dr. Halpin confessed enough for any jury, I said. The manuscript's safe, the clients are packing their guilt in suitcases. That's what I call tied with a bow. Too tidy, Wolfe murmured. Too linear. People are not straight lines. They're ellipses. The manuscript was hidden beneath the vent, yes, but not by Dr. Halpin. Her visit was retrieval, not concealment. She knew where to look because she had been told. Told by who? He looked at me with the faintest trace of pity for my ignorance. By the man who placed it there. That stopped me. Vardis? Precisely. He hid it, not to protect his father's reputation, but to control its revelation. He feared exposure less than powerlessness. By hiding it, he forced his circle to orbit him, wife, partner, doctor, assistant, all dependent on his silence. I let out a low whistle. That's a neat little web, but why hide it if he meant to keep it safe? Because, Wolfe said, safety and leverage are never the same thing. He wanted both. I shook my head. If you're right, he played his wife, his friend, and his father's ghost in one move. He nodded once. It fits. The anonymous letter he claims to have burned, self-written, the performance of fear to disguise authorship, even the theft. He removed the manuscript, then reintroduced its absence to summon attention. It was not stolen at all, only misplaced by intent. I blinked. Then what was Halpern doing crawling through vents and bleeding on the furniture? She was duped, as were we. She believed herself the redeemer, yet she was merely the instrument of his drama. It is a clever man who fabricates danger to mask guilt. I leaned forward. So where does that leave us? You plan on calling the Vardises back for another round? He frowned slightly, which meant yes. I intend to confirm it, but we will not summon them. We will go to them. That got a raised eyebrow from me. Wolfe, leaving the house voluntarily, ranks just above hell, freezing over. You're joking. I'm not, he said, though the words came out as if it pained him to admit them. This deception was performed in their home. It will be undone there. He stood, slowly, like a glacier deciding to change geography, and rang for Fritz. The sedan, he said, at 9. By the time we reached East 72nd, the snow had turned thin and glassy under the streetlights. The Vardis townhouse glowed behind its curtains, every window lit as though fear had kept them from turning any off. Helena opened the door herself. Her face showed surprise, then a flicker of dread when she saw Wolfe in person. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, has something happened? Something has concluded, Wolfe said. Where is your husband? In the study. Appropriate, he said, and brushed past her like a verdict. Dmitri Vardis rose from behind his desk as we entered, his composure slipping for the first time since I'd met him. This is unexpected, he said. I thought the matter was closed. It is, Wolfe said, for everyone but you. Vardis's eyes narrowed. Explain yourself. I prefer to demonstrate, Wolfe said. He moved, deliberately of course, to the vent beneath the window and tapped it with a polished fingernail. You placed the manuscript here, then engineered its disappearance. You arranged for its discovery through an intermediary, creating chaos you could direct. When the circle of your associates began to fracture, you stood as the arbiter of their loyalty. That's absurd, Vardis snapped. Silence, Wolfe said, softly but with the weight of command. You lied about the anonymous letter. You lied about the theft. And when Dr. Halpin grew suspicious and sought to recover the document, you let her act, knowing she would implicate herself. You wished her to bear the blame. She is guilty only of believing in your decency. The man's color drained. You can't prove that. Proof, Wolfe repeated, disdain curling the word. Your vanity is proof enough. You burned nothing. The typewriter in your office upstairs bears the same misalignment as the letters sent to Mrs. Vardis and myself. And your assistant confirmed you dismissed him early the evening the manuscript vanished. You were alone. It is sufficient. Vardis's jaw worked silently for a moment before words emerged. You don't understand. My father ruined men with lies dressed as ideals. He wanted the truth, yes, but only if it broke others first. I wasn't going to let that legacy destroy us all again, so I made a test, a little storm, to see who still lived by fear. Wolfe nodded once, almost gravely. And you learned what all deceivers do, that fear multiplies when invited. You created a blizzard and then complained of the cold. Helena had come in quietly behind us. She stood now near the door, one hand against the frame as though steadying herself against the revelation. Dmitri, she said, her voice barely audible. Was any of it real? The letter, the break-in, all of it? He turned to her, desperate now. Helena, listen to me. I did it for us, for you. I needed to know who I could trust. You don't understand. I understand, she said, and her tone was final. You trust no one, not even me. The silence that followed felt colder than the air outside. Wolfe let it stretch, then broke it with the precision of a guillotine. Mr. Vardis, the manuscript will remain where it belongs, beyond your reach. Consider it confiscated, not destroyed. You will not contest this. You will, instead, learn that truth withheld for leverage is merely corruption in a finer suit. Vardis sank into his chair, defeated, eyes dull with something between shame and relief. Helena turned to me. Will you see him safe, Mr. Goodwin? Safer than he's earned, I said. Wolfe adjusted his coat, ready to leave. Mrs. Vardis, your husband's penance is not ours to dictate, but I suggest you open your windows. This house has grown stifling. Outside, the city's hum had returned under the melting snow. Wolfe stood by the car door, breathing heavily, but not from the walk. Archie, he said, a man who toys with truth is like a cook who seasons for applause. Eventually, he forgets the meal is meant to be eaten. Meaning Vardis cooked himself. Precisely. Now drive. I'm tired of this winter. I did. Behind us, the townhouse lights dimmed, and for the first time in days, I realized the whispering had stopped. Not because the storm had ended, but because there was nothing left to hide in it. The snow had melted by morning, leaving the city gray and honest again. I came downstairs to find Wolfe already awake, rare enough to count as a celestial event, and sitting in his chair with the faint look of a man who has spent the night arguing with himself, and won. The manuscript lay sealed in a brown envelope on his desk, ready for whatever mysterious trustee he'd chosen to handle it. Fritz had left breakfast under silver covers, untouched. You're early, I said. Either insomnia or triumph. Which? Neither, Wolfe replied. Reflection. That's what most people call guilt, only with more syllables. He grunted, which I took as amusement. There are cases, Archie, in which guilt is merely the tax on intelligence. Mr. Vardis will pay it, as will Dr. Halpern. Both were wrong for reasons opposite, and therefore equal. Meaning one sinned for power, and the other for conscience. Precisely. Both attempted to shape truth into a tool. Truth resists ownership. I poured myself coffee. If truth so stubborn, it should have charged them rent. What happens to the manuscript now? It will go to a university archive, he said, where scholars, not schemers, will decide its fate. I have arranged for anonymity in its transfer. The scandal will sleep a while longer, but not forever. That is as it should be. I nodded. So we're done. He gave me a glance over the rim of his glass. You sound disappointed. Not disappointed, I said. Just curious what we got out of it besides another notch on the moral ledger. Peace, he said simply. The brownstone was disturbed, and now it is restored. The disturbance justified the effort. That's philosophical even for you. It is practical, he corrected. Man's only real estate is his mind. I prefer mine untrampled. I was about to reply when the phone rang. I picked it up. It was Saul. He reported that Dmitri Vardis had left his office early that morning, alone, and boarded a train heading north. His wife hadn't gone with him. When I relayed that, Wolfe only nodded. He is seeking distance, not redemption. Both are temporary. And Mrs. Vardis? She will recover, Wolfe said. Her error was hope, not deceit. Hope bruises but rarely rots. The doorbell rang then, one soft, polite press. Fritz answered and returned with an envelope, unstamped, hand-delivered. He handed it to Wolfe, who turned it over once and opened it with his usual care. Inside was a single page in neat handwriting. Mr. Wolfe, thank you for seeing clearly when I could not. I leave the matter in your keeping. Whatever judgment you pass, let it fall on me, not on the living. M.H. Wolfe folded the note and slid it beneath the manuscript envelope. She will atone in her own way, he said quietly. Penitence by letter is a civilized gesture. Civilized, I echoed, and useless. Perhaps, he said. But civility is often the last refuge of those who have lost control. It softens their exit from self-deception. I leaned against the desk. You almost sound sorry for her. Sorry, no. Sympathetic, perhaps. The world does not lack for people who mistake virtue for permission. It is merely tiresome when they are educated. Fritz entered with Wolfe's beer and my relief in liquid form. The office felt warmer, not just from the fire, but from the sense of equilibrium that always returns when a case ends. The way Wolfe prefers. No police, no applause, just order reclaimed. Outside, the city hummed faintly through melting streets. The whisper of the blizzard had gone, replaced by the ordinary clatter of life resuming its routine indifference. Wolfe took his first sip, eyes half closed. Archie, he said after a moment, what lesson do you derive from this? Never trust vents, I said. They let in drafts and trouble. He made the sound that passes for laughter in his species. Trivial but apt. The more serious answer, of course, is simpler. People conceal what they cannot justify, and sooner or later, even silence betrays them. That's bleak, even for breakfast. Realistic, he said. Now go away. I intend to finish my beer in peace, and I've had enough whispers for one winter. I grinned. Sure thing, boss. I'll tell Fritz to make you something noisy for lunch, maybe the kind of soup that argues Beck. He waved me off, already lost to his private thoughts, the firelight painting gold across his face. The brownstone was quiet again, restored to its natural order, Wolfe thinking, me wisecracking, Fritz fussing, and outside, New York pretending. It had never seen snow or secrets. As I reached the door, Wolfe spoke once more, softly but clear. Archie? Yeah? He didn't open his eyes. Should anyone else come to whisper at my door, send them away. I've learned all I care to from the wind. I closed the door behind me and smiled. It wasn't the first time a storm had passed through Nero Wolfe's house, and it wouldn't be the last. But for now, the world was quiet, the balance restored, and the great man was ready, once again, to think in peace.